Bruce Feldman wrote a column on tampering. Here is the new way to cheat in recruiting, so to speak. It is it's tampering. So you reach out to a guy who's at another school. You say, would you be interested in coming to my school? And you could play more and play for a championship. So you can easily see why that appeal would work for, say, a Keenan Peely. He's not going to win a championship at BYU. That's not going to happen. He's going to play in a bigger stage at a better environment. I'm not saying that Tennessee tampered. Also, with Dante Thornton, here's the other way that tampering is even more prevalent. I can tell you that Dante Thornton went to a couple of different schools. Now, was he tampered with? I don't know. But it was simply a bidding war. And he ended up at Tennessee, and that's good for the Vols. So the other way to tamper is you call somebody and you say, I'm just telling you, there could be 250 G's sitting here for you if you decide that you want to take a look at this particular school. And a lot of schools did that. And as a matter of fact, I was told Tennessee didn't start that process that got Dante Thornton in the transfer portal, that it might have been a team somewhere in South Florida. So, tampering. What did Bruce Feldman have to say about that? And then I'm going to ask you the question, do you really have a problem with tampering? Because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I tampered. I liked Caleb Calhoun's work. And I found Caleb Calhoun and I tampered with his previous employer and I called him and I wanted to work with him. This is a business now, kids. Tampering is almost a silly word that you throw on what would be called talent acquisition in any other company. So if Josh Heupel wants to tamper, as long as he doesn't get his hand slapped by the NCAA, go for it. But what did Bruce Feldman have to say, Caleb?
So Bruce Feldman says he got a call a couple of months ago from a coach he knows not well, but a coach he knows is an assistant coach. It was a 2-minute voicemail telling him a story of how one of their better players, not their best players, one of their better players got poached.
Absolutely stupid coach to let that be recorded. Let me go ahead and tell you that. Seriously.
Well,
it was always, when somebody was going to tell me something like that, it was, Dave, call me. Dave, call me. And then it turned into text. You don't ever throw something like out. I mean, you don't throw something out there like that. But anyway, that's a stupid coach. But go ahead.
So Feldman said that the player went into the coach's office the day after the regular season ended and said, I've got an offer from some other school. It was a 6-figure offer, relatively low, but still 6 figures. And the assistant was basically, wait a minute, you think it's legit? And he goes, yeah, I think it's a legit guy. And then he goes, and the assistant says, well, this is what makes him dumber. Well, then you should take it, because if they're offering that kind of money, he's not going to be able to match. That's basically how it went. And Dave, I'm 1,000% with you. Tamper away. There should be no rules on it. If you can tamper with coaches sit there and say, commit to me for 4 years. Players commit to coaches, and coaches can leave on a dime anywhere.
Well, and with social media, these guys all know each other. If the NCAA wants to take any sort of stance against tampering in the transfer portal, you might as well just waste your stupid time, because there's no way with social media. I mean, I'm bringing up the name Dante Thornton again. I mean, for all we know, Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, and Squirrel White were at a same camp together and know each other. Okay, so, I mean, let's take Cedric Tillman, because the time frame would match up better. What if he were at a camp with Brew McCoy and he said, man, this stuff's awesome. You got to check out this Tennessee offense. I know you want to get out of Southern California. Technically, that would be tampering. There is no way you can legislate that against current players, against former players like they used to do. Remember, former players like Peyton Manning couldn't call a prospect and say, you'd look great in orange. That was considered an NCAA violation. If the NCAA wants to spend its time doing that, it's going to be fruitless. They may be lucky to bust one person, and it's a complete waste of time. And let me tell you where this is going. And Rocky Top Tom, I know you hate NIL, but this is what's going to happen. Talking to somebody that's really tied in, and this is going to happen within the next 5 years. So you have this big gray area of NIL money. What's going to happen within 5 years is the schools are just going to pay the players. That's what's going to happen. And that way it's a little bit more even killed. Not to say they can't get endorsements. I don't think anybody's figured out how to do that. So quarterback 1 might still get more than offensive guard 2, but that's the way it's eventually going to happen. And when that happens, the schools that can't pay their players are out. And then you have the mega conference. And I will go on record early August of 2023. This will happen within 5 years. Schools will be paying players, and they will just be the conduit from the boosters to the players. So, like Spire Group, these other collectives, do what you can, make your money while you can, because you're eventually going to be cut out, and nobody's going to feel sorry for you. That's a fact.
No one's going to feel sorry, and that's exactly what's happening. And look, this is why conference contracts, by the way, particularly the Big Ten and SEC, matter, because if you're getting such a bigger payout in the Big Ten with these TV revenue deals, well, guess what? That's NIL money. It's not technically NIL money, but as you and I know, Dave, it's NIL money because the more you're bringing into your program, the less you have to ask for the boosters, and you can ask the boosters to basically go buy players. And that's going to be where this is now. My question to you on the recruiting show, Dave, I was thinking about this. So if you were doing a power ranking of like you've covered recruiting, where does NIL come in this? And I asked Josh Pate this at SEC Media Days, but I want to know your thoughts. Where does NIL come? Because I feel like your chances to get to the NFL is number one if you're a 5-star athlete, right?
No. From what I've talked to, it's NIL number one now.
NIL's number one?
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying you would go to South Dakota State over Alabama. Okay. So everything has to, but you would go to South Dakota State if they were paying $500,000 and Alabama said, we can't give you anything because we'll give you a shot at the NFL.
Okay. So what if it's what if the offers are competitive? Can the NFL?
That's a better way. Yeah. Better way of phrasing the question. If the offers are competitive, I do think it's still making it to the NFL.
Okay. And after chances of going to the NFL, location was probably the second biggest thing for recruiting back in the day, right? Like Georgia getting Georgia kids, LSU getting Louisiana kids. That was a big factor in recruiting, right?
Every kid was different, but I would say this. I would say the number one before NIL was can they get me to the NFL? Number 2 is how quickly can I play? And number 3 would have been loyalty for whatever reason. Your parents went there, or you grew up in Knoxville or Baton Rouge or Gainesville. I would say that was every kid's different, but as a whole, if I were to write a book, and I've thought about having your college kid recruited for dummies, I've thought about writing that book, the For Dummies book.
Yes.
And the number one chapter is every coach is going to lie to you. But now I think it's NIL. I think everything's second.
So so NFL, so competitive, but you agree NFL could outweigh it if the offer's competitive. So my question with this is, I've always said, we've talked about it forever, that LSU's had a massive recruiting advantage because they're the only Power 5 program in the state of Louisiana. Yes. Well, does being in the state of Louisiana matter anymore, where if they're so far behind at NIL, which is what we both heard at SEC Media Days, is that they're actually behind at NIL? Well, does that mean that if LSU's competitive with Tennessee, but Tennessee offers more, do you think it's more likely a Louisiana kid now chooses Tennessee over LSU despite the location advantage?
Can I give you a read between the lines statement?
Sure.
Jordan Matthews ain't a Vol if LSU's got their NIL collective together.
Well, I thought, Jordan Matthews could have been like a Lucas Taylor, I thought, back in 2005, who chose Tennessee.
I was told money was a big deal.
Oh, interesting.
I was told money was
but that's one anecdotal thing. Does LSU just completely lose the advantage of being in Louisiana now? Is that just a dead advantage with NIL, or does that?
No, because they'll get their stuff together, or that thing that I said where the colleges just pay them will happen. There's plenty of money there, and we're talking about one guy. You're right. That's anecdotal. They still out of the guys in the state of Louisiana, if they wanted 20, they might have gotten 19. I mean, so they're still golden. Does it diminish it a little bit? Maybe a little bit, but surely LSU is going to get their stuff together, you would think.
Same with like Ohio State and Georgia. They can just get players in their backyard still, even though NIL's a thing.
Yeah, I just think that you're going to have to be prepared to have something on the table, and you're not supposed to pay prospects, but you have something on the table where you say, I mean, for goodness gracious, I saw Nico like show up on an Instagram Walmart commercial. For the love of, I mean, for the love of, I swear, for the love of goodness, I mean, that didn't happen in his 7 months on campus. That all had to be in play and ready to go and agreed upon. So the money was definitely there. Whereas in Florida, you got Jaden Rashad that shows up and his money's not there. He's like, I'm going back home.
Not to mention the OnlyFans that are going to come from women's sports now.
That's you got me so confused on that. I thought I made reference to OnlyFans on several occasions, and Caleb would give me a weird look because I did not know that it was what it is, and I'm not going to tell you what it is if you're listening.
Hooker and OnlyFans.
Pardon me, as I cough, but I really thought it was like you're a fan of this particular school. So, like, it's the OnlyFans LSU web or the OnlyFans South Carolina website. But to get back to your point, if the money's equal, no offense, South Carolina. Okay, I know we have a lot of South Carolina listeners, but if the money's equal and it's $500,000 to go to South Carolina or $500,000 to go to Alabama or Georgia, and you can play for a championship and you can be prepared for the NFL, which Kirby Smart has now proven he can do in a short amount of time. Nick Saban's done it over a decade. You'd be insane-o. Unless it's early playing time. So that does get down to the individual kid. You still need to be ready to sit the bench for a year or two if you go to Alabama or Georgia. And I thought that might undermine them, the transfer portal, and their immediate success, but it hasn't. Kids are still willing to go there and sit the bench. John Calipari said it best. I know a lot of people don't like John Calipari, but don't trip over nickels to get millions. And, you know, a couple of $100,000 for an offensive guard, is that the going rate? I don't know. But if you go to an Alabama, or now I think you could argue a Tennessee with what they did with Darnell Wright and what they've done with Cooper Mays, or a Georgia, somebody that prepares you for the NFL, those are tens of millions of dollars. Those are life-changing, generational changing type of money. Don't go to a school for $50,000 and think that, hey, I got $50,000. My financial concerns for the rest of my life are over, because they ain't.
No, go to school to be a first-round draft pick more than anything else. Because you're a first-round draft pick, it doesn't even matter if your NFL career doesn't work out. You got some guaranteed generational wealth at that point.
Agreed. And I know this sounds crazy, but go to school if you're in that sort of position. Take the easiest major you can. It used to be urban studies. The Linda Benzelmeyer case situation came down the pike with Tennessee. They'd send them to urban studies. It was super easy. That was one of the various NCAA issues that Tennessee avoided. But I interviewed Linda Benzel-Myers, and she goes, they're just funneling these guys into urban studies, and they're getting good grades, and they're fine, and they're able to still be eligible. But what do they get out of that? And I said, that's a fair point. But you know, they're able to come back to school. Like we just talked to Fred White and Dwayne Goodrich and Reggie Cobb. They're able to come back to school and get their degree, and the university still pays for it. And she goes, really? I'm like, yeah, really. So while you're there, focus on football, knowing that if you go to one of the top 25, 50 programs, top 40, they're going to pay for your school to come back.
Weight rooms over classrooms, baby. That's the way it should be.
That's what I would tell my son. I mean, if he was a borderline, if he can come back, if he can make a run at the NFL, if he was that type of prospect and he can come back and get his degree. Now, I would be on his rear end when the NFL didn't work out to go back and get your degree. I'm still going to be that traditional good parent that says, get your degree. But if you want to focus on football because that's your best option, do it. Do it. Absolutely do it.